We are so excited to be here with our good friend Stephen Totilo.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Hello.
You were so lucky because you got to go to Nintendo's hands-on event for Switch 2. Was it yesterday that you were there?
I was there. Yeah, I was there on Wednesday.
Wow. So fresh in the mind of Stephen Totilo is your hands-on impressions of Switch 2. Sounds like you got to play a lot of stuff, see the system, obviously. So we wanted to pick your brain about like everything you saw, what you loved, what you didn't love, biggest surprises, all the things. So we're so happy to have you here.
I love being here and pick away.
Yeah, I guess just for starters, if you can tell us like what was the format of the event? What was kind of, how did they structure the day? What's everything that you got to do? We've been reading, like so many people, the impressions. It sounds like there was some sort of a roundtable interview, but how did Nintendo plan the day for you?
Right. You want the story behind the story.
Yes.
Always give us the dirt.
You'll have flashbacks to things you worked on in the past, because this was an amalgamation of approaches Nintendo has taken in the past with one new twist. So what many people who are following y'all may not know is how E3 used to work with Nintendo, which is that while the public would see the E3 stage presentation that Reggie Fils-Aimé or somebody would be doing, or later they would see the pre-recorded Nintendo Direct on the Tuesday of E3 week or whatever, on the Sunday before E3 really began, when the forklifts were still loading things into the Los Angeles Convention Center, they would let a select number of media, a few dozen, maybe a little more than that, go to a special room and watch the Direct or get the news somehow in advance. And then after that, actually, if I remember correctly, I think that day, or maybe it would be a later day, also then do a roundtable where you would have somebody from Nintendo of America standing there with, or sitting there with multiple people from NCL, from Nintendo's Japanese offices, talking about things. And so they did that again this time, in that we all were secretly watching the Direct, this time not in advance, but at the same time as the public, but from the secret location of this New York City venue, which is also where they're then going to be doing these public showcases that start on Friday. Shortly after that, they let people go hands-on with the system. And then after that, people gathered back together around 3 p.m. in the afternoon for the round table with 3 hardware developers who are the 3 principals. They're the 3 gentlemen who also had a post go up on Nintendo.com, a 4-part, here's how we designed the Switch 2. So that part was all pretty familiar. Even the hands-on aspect of it, being like, you've seen a thing, now go play it, was familiar. Again, flashbacks to various E3s where I remember Mr. Iwata and Reggie on stage talk about like the Wii U, and then, okay, press, go over here out of this room, and voila, there's a bunch of Wii U set up, and then you could play them. And so this was, leave this room, and voila, here are a bunch of Switch 2s to play with. The big twist is simply that this was all prelude to the public getting their hands on it. So when they did something like this in New York for the Switch launch, which was also 2 months before the official launch of the console, they did this showcase. They let the press in, you play the system. They didn't then 2 days later let the public walk through that same venue, as best I can recall. Maybe you guys recall or know differently, but I don't think the public did that. So that part's different. The fact that this all sets up this like global tour of the Switch 2.
Yeah, something we've been really wondering about is who exactly is going to be at these events, because these are events that the US is doing, Europe's doing, Japan's doing.
Yeah.
And when we did the Switch event, like we got really lucky because we had Mr. Miyamoto there, we had Mr. Aonuma, and we really got like the cream of the crop in terms of the spokespeople. It sounds like the main spokespeople at this event were those 3 developers from the Direct.
Those are the people who spoke, but there were some faces that you would have found familiar who were also there. Mr. Kozumi, who was one of was the chief architect of the original Switch. I saw him there. I believe I saw Shinya Takahashi, who I believe basically operates as the head of video game production at the company. Pretty sure I saw him there. Doug Bowser, head of Nintendo of America, obviously there. Who is sort of the current Reggie, if people are kind of following how all that works. So yeah, there were other luminaries, and I don't know if they did interviews. I think some interviews are still actually ongoing because they kind of had that space for a while. So we'll see who winds up talking. But in terms of who they had speaking that day, it was those 3, the same folks that were also doing the article online.
And those are the 3 folks that were in the roundtable as well, speaking publicly about the Switch 2 hardware.
That's right. That's right. And they have an interesting background.
Yeah.
Mr. Dota was the guy in the orange shirt. If you've seen the pictures, I don't know if people have noticed that they pointed this out at the thing. They're color coded in how they dress to match the
Blue,
Switch 2.
Orange, and gray, right? To
Oh,
match
I'm
the
just
Switch
now
2.
realizing that.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is by
Wow.
design, I believe. This is some deep
Wow.
cut costuming.
All right.
But okay.
Yeah, they quizzed us there. They said, "Do you know why we're dressed this way?" And somebody's like, "You're dressed like the Switch." And sure enough, that's what it is. But yeah, the developers were there, and I want to get his full name for you, so I don't want to mess this up. Let me just dig this up in a second for you. But the gentleman that I'm referring to, he was the technical, the head of technology on Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and now he's the head of technology on all of the Switch 2, and that impressed me and just got me thinking about how well those games, how effectively they tapped the hardware, right, of the original Switch. I think like Tears of the Kingdom is seen as this kind of technological marvel of like, how did this system that's running on these like super old chips, Takahiro Dota is his name, how did the system running on these really old chips possibly create and render a game in such detail and with such effective functionality as Tears of the Kingdom? And I was actually really intrigued by the idea that he's now overseeing all the technology for Switch 2. Koichi Kawamoto was the main speaker. He's the person you see in the middle of a lot of these photographs. He's color coded in his dress, like the. Oh no, actually no, I'm sorry. He might be the one who's in blue. So he's the left Joy-Con, and then there's Tetsuya Sasaki who is the third. And they all Nintendo does this thing, right, where they have people who kind of produce the system the same way that you'll bring out people who kind of produce the hardware. Microsoft has not, I don't think, as aggressively promotes like system architects anymore. And PlayStation for a few generations now has promoted Mark Cerny as the main architect, and that's who the public kind of attaches their sort of understanding of. This is the person thinking about what this system will do technologically. Certainly Cerny for the PS4 and the PS5. And Nintendo, they seem to be showing an approach of, we have this kind of brain trust of Nintendo veterans work on this system, then we have this brain trust for Nintendo veterans kind of architect this system. And so like a manifestation of that was Mr. Kawamoto was asked by Danny Pena of Gamertag Radio about the eShop and what to expect from the performance of the eShop. And Mr. Kawamoto talked about how like that was a real pet issue of his because he wanted it to run faster and more smoothly. And he's clearly kind of building on his experience with the original Switch, and he has an opportunity now to oversee the Switch 2. And so that becomes a priority for him. So I think that's interesting to think about how those sort of, creative, leadership possibilities and experiences go at the company. And maybe there's even like friendly competition, I guess, amongst the team and figuring out, okay, how can our system now be better than the system that you guys over here did to improve it?
Yeah, it was interesting to us to see that they were the three who were really getting trotted out, because in the past, that role of kind of overseeing a system has gone to a much more seasoned developer, seasoned in terms of, their work at Nintendo, but also kind of comfort level of being a spokesperson, because it was Mr. Koizumi before, and then before him, it was Mr. Iguchi on some of the previous hardware. But aside from Mr. Dota, who did have a small role in promoting the previous Zelda games, the other two seem to be relative newcomers to this. So it is a big ask of them to like, now you're the face of this system.
Host this direct,
You're right.
do all these interviews, be in front of people, be in front of media. So yeah, I can see that being a bit of a change from their day-to-day. Yes, I think so. Yeah,
they were amiable and seem very human. I mean, Nintendo has, and I don't know how you all have experienced it in your capacity as formerly at Nintendo. Certainly as a journalist, I experienced, the warmth of Nintendo and the friendliness of their, of their creators, and of the how sort of cozy and happy their games are, and how thoughtful their developers are when you chat with them. But then I've also experienced the stoicism or sternness of Nintendo, when you're trying to cover a lawsuit they've been, where they're suing somebody, or they're I'm trying to get an interview and I can't get an interview or something like that. And they're very, like, well, we're Nintendo, basically. Why do we have to do that? And so you kind of have that in kind of the dynamic around the company that I think gamers experience as well, where it's like, we both love this company because of how happy they make us with their games, but we also get stressed and maybe angry at this company because they operate as such this behemoth of business. And so I always find it kind of reassuring, maybe reaffirming my feelings about human nature, that ultimately we're all like, jokey, friendly people with normal like sort of personalities or whatever, and what have you. And so it was very humanizing to see these three guys up there talking about what, wanting to make the, this eShop better because, how they felt about, it before, or laughing with each other about getting obsessed about some feature, or making fun of each other that they're about to go into too long an answer about some topic. And they just, so there's a warmth, and it was a nice chemistry amongst the crew.
For sure. I think that is the best part of some of these events that they don't have very often. It's for, big reveals like new hardware, where you do get a chance to get a little bit more of that humanized personal view of Nintendo through the developers. And we always, enjoyed that view into the company as well. And they've been so sort of cagey about that stuff lately that you haven't gotten a chance to see the developers face to face or in person for a long time. So this is a great opportunity to introduce some newer people to the mix. That said, what would you say was like the general mood at the event? Nintendo obviously came off the big direct, and then there was obviously a lot of conversation around pricing and things like that. So a bit of an up and down in terms of the day, but what would you say was like the mood during the event?
It was, I think I wasn't like people losing their minds. It wasn't like despair either. It was pretty even keeled. I would say one of the more memorable moments is when during the direct, we all were collectively watching game announcement after game announcement when they announced the Nintendo Switch 2 System Tour game and showed what essentially looked like what you would think would be a pack-in tutorial kind of game akin to Astro's Playroom on the PlayStation 5, right? And then they said it was going to be a paid game. There was laughter throughout the room. So that was one reaction that gave you a little bit of a sense of things. But I mean, for me, it was because it was reporters coming in from all around the country, and in some cases from out of the country. So for me, it was also like the event was very much colored by, in a positive way, seeing faces of people I hadn't seen in a while. Yes, I'll run to people at GDC, or I'll run to people at DICE, or even Summer Games Fest. But there's just it's just a different, and it's still, even though we're a few years away from the most intense COVID lockdowns, it still doesn't feel like we're in a normal rhythm of sort of seeing people. So I'm seeing people I used to work with and what have you. And in that regard, it was actually it was nice to just to get together with folks. People were playing the games and they were keeping busy. They gave people a lot of playing time. So the event started with you had to be there around 7 a.m. The direct began airing, or 7:30, I think. The direct began at 9 a.m. Obviously ended around 10, and you could play until 6 p.m. So 8 hours of time if you went to the round table or went upstairs to have the free lunch. You weren't playing necessarily as long, but you get a lot of time in. So people were keeping busy, going from system to system and trying things out.
And in terms of the gameplay, did they have you going on a prescribed order, or was it just we're going to turn you loose and you can go see whatever you want?
Bit of both. You started at Mario Kart, you ended at Donkey Kong. In between, you had more choice in between. So they brought us through. Initially, we came into an area. They have and again, to be clear, this is the same venue that they're going to do the public showcase. So in some ways, I think we were also kind of a dry run for what the public is going to experience in New York, also in Paris simultaneously. I believe there'll be these events throughout this weekend, and then it'll be going to Los Angeles and elsewhere. So you have a lot of people. The majority of people that you see, I was seeing at this event, and I think the public will see, are people in red Nintendo Switch themed shirts. They are people that are there as demoists to showcase things. They're standing next to any of the dozens, probably more than 100 TVs that are set up in various rooms that you can go to that have Switch 2s set up, some with classic, with the Pro Controller, some in the handheld mode. And these folks, the most distinct thing about them is that every time you walk into the next room, at least a few of them, they got nothing to do but clap for you. And so you go in and you're being applauded as you enter the room, and the people are cheering for you like, yeah!
That's
what
so
do I do?
weird.
It's like this interesting vibe that was there. So they first brought us down, though, to play Mario Kart World, the new open world Mario Kart game. And so I played that in Grand Prix mode on both the TV and then the handheld. So that was the first experience.
Thoughts on that game?
I mean, how do you mess up Mario Kart? Have they ever messed up Mario Kart? I don't know. Was Double Dash good? That's the only one I don't.
Yes.
Oh,
Steven, how dare
people
you?
are furious right now.
I
I
don't
just didn't
think.
play it. I don't know. I was not.
I mean, some of them don't hold up as well nowadays, but in the moment, I think all the Mario Karts have been very good
Right.
and fun. So,
Right.
but this one, obviously, the scope is so big. As you described it yourself as an open world,
Yes.
Mario Kart game. So, like, give us a sense of the scope and what makes this feel like so much bigger than 8 Deluxe.
Yeah, were they giving you any information of it would take this long to drive from one point to the other?
No,
or
I
something
should
like
have.
that?
I should have tried that. Right. I should have just tried driving. I mean, for I guess the basic way to think about it is imagine any Mario Kart game you've played before, and what if all those tracks were on one huge map, and you could drive across this map and encounter and drive into any of these tracks. So it's not clear yet how much open world kind of discoverability there's going to be. Are you going to be able to drive around and just like discover tracks that you didn't know existed, or, hidden things and whatnot? I don't know. Will there be characters to talk to? I don't know. But what we did in Grand Prix was kind of started in a race. They said, "Oh, you're driving to the race." I didn't really kind of grasp that. It became more clear when I played the tournament, the elimination knockout mode. So I'll describe that one more because I think I can do a better job on that one. 24 racers is the maximum number of race cars as far as we know so far. And this particular mode I played, Knockout, is for 24 players. So they had all these systems kind of hooked up to each other. Before you start, you're in this free drive mode where you can be anywhere. And this was one of the things that sold me on this idea of how vast the game world is, because I'm standing at one television with a Switch 2, and there's 2 or 3 TVs to my left with other people playing. And we're ostensibly all in the same session of the game. But I'm driving around in a swamp. The person to my left is driving around some sort of like spooky castle at night. The person to their left is in some snowy place, driving over the snow. Different biomes, different terrains, whatever you want to call it. But we're all in the same session. Also, by the way, during free drive, you can rewind if you don't like how you made a turn. I asked what effect that has on other players, because I assume the whole game isn't rewinding, and will the person see me just driving backwards? The demoist wasn't sure, so I don't know. In that case, all the players are voting on which Grand Prix or sequence of tracks you're going to then do this knockout mode in. Took a while, I guess, maybe connection issues or whatever, for it to finally lock into the session, but free drive ended and we all then queued up. So then we have 24 race cars. People have probably seen from the footage, you guys have seen, there's tons of different characters you can choose from, including a cow.
Different costumes too, right?
Who else?
Different costumes that they can be in as well.
Yes, tons of costumes, different tracks. I played as Pauline from Super Mario Odyssey and Donkey Kong before that. And start as 24, and they tell you there's going to be a checkpoint where they're going to eliminate 21 through 24. So there's going to be 20 racers left. I think that every checkpoint was at the end of each race. And so we were doing, I think, 5 sequential races. Again, it's all stitched together. So you're never leaving into a menu. So you're just driving as fast as you can to the first one. And 4 people get knocked out and everybody else keeps driving. I made it till I think the final 12 or maybe the final 8. And I think I made it to the final 8, but I was 12th in that. So I was knocked out. And I was not part of the final 8 going through it. But it's like the roads are wider because they're full of so many more cars. There's so many more characters. There's so much more item chaos happening. Blue shells, red shells, giant mushrooms. It's just kind of supersized in that way. You can see so far because they can draw the graphics at a really great distance. You're seeing so many callbacks to Mario, sort of elements. I saw a Goomba bouncing around in the shoe. I just want to say Haribo shoe, but that's the gummy frog,
Karubo
right?
shoe. Yeah.
Haribo
not a gummy bear.
Yes.
Not a gummy shoe.
No. I saw the football guys from Super Mario World.
Yeah. Charge and Chuck.
The Charge and Chuck.
Yeah. And so you're going through, and I'm sure there are tons of deep cuts and Mario lore. And so it's exciting to me as somebody who loves open world games. I've never gotten tired of the Ubisoft formula. I'm not hoping that there's a peak I can climb to defog the map in Mario World, but I wouldn't hate it if there was in Mario Kart World. But I'm very interested in seeing kind of what they do out of having an open world. But if nothing else, they let you stitch these races together into these supersized races. And so everything is it was super fun and not a good idea necessarily to be in first place, as I learned. It's kind of the Mario Kart pitfall. Don't be in the lead because you'll soon be last.
Yeah. The rubber banding, as they say, in Mario Kart. What other games did you find to be like surprising or really impressive that you got a chance to play?
My favorite game of the show was Donkey Kong Bananza, which
Yes.
I believe is going to cause a mass confusion of how you spell the word bonanza because
It's
Bananza.
That
banan.
already happened to me
You
yesterday.
spelled
Yeah,
it
it's like, wait a
wrong.
minute.
Bananza.
Bananza?
Yeah.
Gwen Stefani.
There
To
we
help
go.
us.
There we go.
Because I mean, it looks right. It looks right with the A, but obviously they're going for a banana thing in there. So
Yeah.
I thought it was, you thought I said sacrilege before. I'm going to say even more sacrilege in a moment. So get ready.
Uh-oh.
I thought this was when I saw the direct that it was simply going to be a 3D Donkey Kong platformer, and I actively dislike Donkey Kong 64.
Oh. Well, there may be a few more people out there who agree with you on that one.
Wow.
So
Hot
my
takes
instinct-
today, Stephen. Okay.
So my reaction to that one was, first of all, it was like, well, it's interesting they're doing one of these the first time in a long time. And then my second one was, okay, but why? Because one of the issues I had with Donkey Kong 64 was that not only was it kind of a tedious collectathon, because yes, you could be different apes, but you had to be each one to collect the different colored bananas, and there was way too many things to collect. But also, it didn't really distinguish itself that much from Banjo-Kazooie, to say nothing of Super Mario 64, and you had this abundance of 3D platformers. So I'm watching the direct. I don't know how you all were feeling. You're thinking a 3D Mario game is going to come up, maybe, and then 3D Donkey Kong comes out, and it looked like exciting. But initially, immediately, I thought, okay, but what is a 3D
Mario?
Donkey Kong, and how is that different than a 3D Mario? And happily, I found out when I played the game, and I was amazed by what the game actually is, and thought it was terrific. And it's by far the thing I'm the most excited about. Did you guys go through that same journey at all with me? I mean, I'll talk about what it was like once I played it. But did you guys were excited, or were you like, or what?
Yeah, kind of. I definitely, when I saw like sort of, they did a pan in the very beginning that looked like just kind of like overworlds, and I initially thought it was a 3D Mario game because the environments looked very Mario-esque. I still really like, Donkey Kong. I'm excited about a 3D Donkey Kong game, but I was also very curious about the gameplay and how it makes it feel distinct from, a Mario platformer. And from the trailer, and you can tell us with your hands-on impressions, but it did seem like this sort of like destroying, digging, interacting with all the things in the world, like picking up a rock and just chucking it, that kind of Donkey Kong strength was on full display. So maybe that is what feels really good and makes it feel distinctive. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you were very perceptive, Krysta, and you sort of figured it out maybe better than I did from first impressions. Once I was playing it, I sort of got it, right? This is not simply a platformer, it's a systems-driven game, and it can be very exciting when a game is in the hands of a very skilled developer to see what they do with something that starts as kind of a basic system, and then you can kind of layer things on top of that, right? And so in this case, the system appears to be all tied to the destructibility of the environment. I started as Donkey Kong in a mine shaft, and I'm being asked by the little Kongs to go do things. I immediately ignored them as I learned that my ability was to punch walls. So I just punched the wall next to me. And then I realized that it sort of took a big chunk out of the wall. So I punched it again and took another chunk. And I was like, wait a minute, I can just break through the side of the wall. And how far can I keep going? And I was finding kind of hidden pieces of gold as I went and treasure chests. I'm like, oh my God, they've stuffed what normally would just be, I think, in any 3D platform, what we would imagine would be the sort of out of bounds physical mass of the boundaries of the world. They've stuffed that with discoverable loot because you can actually punch your way into the walls. Then I got, I was tutorialized into learning about a kind of ground punch that digs under, creates a depression under you, a crater. And the same thing happened all over again. So, okay, that was kind of cool, but I'm in a mine level. So I'm like, okay, this is just how they're teaching me. They want me to know I can punch things by surrounding me with rock in this enclosed space. Okay, whatever. I go to a second area. It's like this big floating island. And there's like some rocky hills nearby and stuff like that. And again, I kind of ignore what the game's telling me to do. And I just start punching around. And soon enough, I'm just punching into the ground. And the camera is kind of zooming out a little bit. And it's showing almost what it looks like when you accidentally clip through the bottom of a game world, where you can kind of see like the emptiness of the universe below the game level. So I feel like, am I about to like poke through the ground of this game? Like, what is happening? And I realize it's just they're playing with like the transparency so that I can still see my character, even though my vision should be occluded by like the ground, which would be in the way. Right, camera's here, the ground's here, I'm here, so they're going to make the ground invisible. I keep digging down, and suddenly I'm in this like cave, and there's all this stuff in it, and there's like fossils to
So
find,
cool.
and there's like bombs to like bomb rocks to throw around, and it's like they knew I was going to go down here. And
Amazing
so
game design.
I'm wrapping my head around this idea that, oh, this game is all about being able to destroy the levels that you're in. And there are boundaries. You eventually dig enough down to the side, you clang into metal. And so you're like, okay, there's like a metal box around the level. But when I hit the map button in the second area that I was in, that was this floating island, and I zoomed out, essentially the level looked like this layer cake of a terrain for me to dig through. And there was a very conspicuous option to reset terrain, which signaled to me that they anticipate that players are going to try to destroy everything they can, maybe to the point of destroying some staircase you needed to get to the next thing. That was initially what wowed me. Then something I didn't fully grasp was the demo was telling me that, oh, you should look at your targeting reticule for when he's throwing stuff, and you're going to see something about what you're throwing at. I didn't fully get that. And then I was watching the Nintendo Treehouse showcase today, and they showed how, kind of, they slowed it down a bit. And you could see that it's telling you the type of material that you're pointing at. You're pointing at dirt, you're pointing at mud, you're pointing at rock. And so there's a whole kind of interaction system of materials that you're carrying something like a heavy rock, okay, throw it, and it's going to actually destroy the thing you're throwing it at, versus something soft. And again, like this idea of this systems-based game playing with the physicality of the objects and the environment and all that, to me is very exciting, because Tears of the Kingdom was essentially a systems-based game. Like, build contraptions and see what can come of it. Breath of the Wild was a systems-based game, right? Of see the interactions between flame and freezing and wood and things like that, and see what comes of it. So I'm like, if that's what this game actually is, like, sign me up. I'm super excited to see it. I wish I knew who was making it. They're not.
I was just gonna ask you
So
if you
they
got a
didn't tell you,
sense
I
of.
take it.
Now you see you got my little radar is up because you said Koizumi-san was there, which I'm like, EAD Tokyo was
Was he
there.
looking over your
Was
shoulder?
he looking over
Yeah.
your shoulder as you were playing Donkey Kong and taking some mental notes?
He might have been. I mean, I think the conventional wisdom, and conventional wisdom doesn't take us far with trying to imagine what Nintendo's up to, right? The conventional wisdom would be that the 3D Mario team is working on a 3D Mario. But clearly they could have pivoted. I was trying to imagine who it could be. Were there any telltale signs of anything? When I zoomed out on that map and I could kind of rotate the world and think about where I was going, I got a little bit of Captain Toad vibe to it, but I don't even know if the Captain Toad team is a team, let alone like
They're
I don't know
also
who
at
made that
EAD
team.
Tokyo.
Yeah.
That's a sub team of EAD Tokyo.
Well, there you go.
Hayashida's right? Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
I don't want to, but I have no idea. I have no
Did,
idea. And
did they give you any more background on the setting of the game, of Donkey Kong being in this kind of underground mining colony? Like, I'm so curious about that. How did he get there? What is he doing? What is the conceit?
He's wearing
of all
like
this?
a mining
He's
outfit,
in the outfit
too. Yeah.
Are you saying this can't be canon? You're seeing lore inconsistencies?
I don't know. I'm just curious.
What's the Donkey Kong timeline? Just kidding.
I mean, the Donkey Kong timeline is one of the more controversial timelines of Nintendo, right? Because there's the question of, in the various games where you play as Donkey Kong, there are theories that in some of those games, the Kong you're playing as is actually Cranky Kong, right?
Kong.
Right,
Yeah, I have
right.
heard that theory.
So I don't know. I saw somebody speculating this is a prequel and you're playing that. I don't know. Where's Lanky? I don't like Donkey Kong 64, but I do like Lanky Kong. That's the dichotomy of
okay.
me.
All right.
Interesting.
I love it.
The third game that they had on Treehouse Live today was Metroid, so I assume they had a big area for that. I expect you played that?
Of course I played that.
Yes,
Metroid Prime 4 Beyond.
That's good, because we have been feeling that game is maybe getting a little downplayed in all of the hoopla around the Switch 2, and obviously there have the Switch 2 version. So we're glad to hear that it had a prominent place.
Yeah.
Well, prominent in that it was in the room with all the other games, but it didn't
Right.
have the Mario Kart entryway applause area, and it didn't have the clap for you because you were about to play Donkey Kong area. So it was in between. But so was the Nintendo Switch 2 System Tour game. So was Mario Party, Jamboree TV, and Kirby Forgotten Land expansion. It's a weird game in the sense that We know it's a Switch game as well as a Switch 2 game. We haven't really seen a difference in how it performs on both. It looked great there. They were using it to, one of the kind of unusual things, I guess, about this whole experience was the extent to which Nintendo talked about specs. They were asked in their hardware roundtable how fast the processor is, and they declined to say that. We don't usually talk about those types of numbers. They said NVIDIA, which is making the chip for the Switch 2, would talk about it. They only acknowledge that they're using DLSS for, I guess, improving frame rates, right, with AI. But they didn't. But what they did talk about a lot that surprised me was like frame rates of their games, to the point where when you were playing Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, the like kind of kiosk was labeled, this is the 120 frames per second 1080p version, or this is the 4K whatever version. And so, they really wanted you to know this version is doing a thing that the Switch 1 version won't do. But they're clearly hiding what this game is really about. As much as I feel like I got my head around the Donkey Kong Bonanza, I mean, joke will be on me when like there's only 2 levels based on destroying things, and all the other levels are just collecting colored bananas, different Kongs. That again. But I really, like, I was so excited for something different from Rare. 1999, young me.
There's some
The
trauma.
wound goes deep.
There's a trauma.
Wow.
There's a trauma.
But Metroid Prime 4 Beyond's demo really felt like it was the introduction of the game. You're Samus Aran with 0 energy capsules, but you get 1 while you're playing. You can turn into the Morph Ball. You have the Power Beam. You may have a few more abilities than you have at the beginning of Metroid Prime 1, when you were then, famously kind of depowered as you're kind of knocked out by, was it Ridley or whatever is running around? I can't even remember. I don't
Yes.
think it's this. But in Beyond, in what I'm assuming is the intro, it's very much the familiar things. I'm doing my scan visor, scanning everything, which I love. I want to scan everything. I want to read about everything that's in the environment. Lock on, and then they had motion control on, so you're locking on by holding the trigger, and then you're kind of having a little bit of aim as you use the gyro capacity of the Joy-Con controller to do that. Hit the button to roll into the Morph Ball. You have a boss battle at the end that you want to sort of circle strafe, hit the weak points, and defeat missiles that you can shoot. 0 of anything you haven't done before in a Metroid Prime game. And then Psylocke, or whatever his name is, he shows up at the end looking tough, and this device that I think when I scanned it, it said, we recovered this from some mystery planet or whatever. We don't know what it is. I think he shoots it and it blows up, and that's like the screen goes to white. And I'm thinking, this is the moment where you then become depowered and the game actually begins, or this is the moment where you figure out, this is what the game is actually about. I don't know about you all, but when I saw the direct last week and they said that Samus Aran gains psychic powers that allow her to open doors, I thought that cannot possibly be the hook for this game.
Yeah. I had the same impression as you, actually. When I saw the game last week in the Switch 1 Direct, and we saw it again for a little bit in this Direct for Switch 2, I was just really left with more questions than I think whatever they showed me answered. And I was a little bit like, tell me more about the psychic powers, because right now I don't quite understand how that works in with all the rest of the gameplay.
Right.
Interesting that you kind of got that sense, even playing the game, that it was very sort of intro, like you're not really learning what is the new hook for the game in this moment. We've been feeling a little bit like, gosh, it feels like this game has this kind of is sitting at this like a little bit of a danger zone of like, could it be forgotten a little bit in the rest of the Switch 2 lineup stuff? Right. Unfortunate if so, because we've all been waiting for this game for a super long time, and if it somehow kind of gets lost in the mix, that would be unfortunate,
Yeah. What I read one theory after people watched somebody reacting to the trailer of last week, that the gimmick could be time travel.
Oh,
they picked this up from just some of the marketing language around it, where they were like, they so like, when I don't even remember what the verbiage is, and it was like, I'm like, I have no idea. This might just be very like, grasping it at the very tiniest shred of something. But you think about how Metroid Prime 2 added the idea of there being this kind of negative universe, almost like a Link to the Past type kind of flip of the world. And Metroid Prime 3 had both the motion control as kind of the addition of it, but also now multiple planets that you were going to and kind of doing a little bit of space travel and spaceship stuff in between, I think, if I remember correctly. And So I assume there's some sort of hook. I can confirm, by the way, that in this intro area, you do open doors, even though you don't have psychic powers yet. So,
Wow.
Right on
you
the
open the doors
box.
by shooting at them. Maybe it's nicer to open doors with your mind than with a gun, like possibly. Like Samus is kind of learning a little bit about how to be like a better member of society. Maybe this game
Don't
is all about
destroy
her.
everything, Samus. Gosh, these space stations are very expensive to rebuild.
I will say there were, by the way, in the intro, there were enemies that were kind of like they were half defeated already. They're just kind of like slouched down like a face.
Them out of their
you're like,
misery.
the game's like, just go zap them. I'm like,
It's like an
what is
old
going
Yeller
on?
kind of moment. They're rabies. You gotta get rid of them.
Maybe that's what it was.
Oh
So,
no.
How did they introduce the controls for the game at this demo? Did they start you with the mouse? Did they give you a choice of what you wanted to start with?
They handed me the controllers, which had to. I'm trying to remember now. They were the Joy-Con controllers separated, and let me play. And I think at one point they said, you can do mouse control, and the kind of magic moment. And this was probably the most magical moment in terms of anything related to the interface of the Switch, of the entire event, of the Switch 2. Excuse me. Was that you're just holding the Joy-Con and you put it down on the table. It's immediately in mouse mode. There's no button press to trigger it. There's nothing.
Okay.
Later on, Bryant Francis from Game Developer asked the hardware folks in the roundtable about how does that work. They talk more about how it's an option, and I later talked to the Hogwarts Legacy people who also said in the direct that they were going to allow mouse control, and they told me yes, in our game it is a menu option. So the hardware devs were saying it can be something you pause the game to activate, but it can also be automated. But they didn't explain exactly how it was done. I mean, we can guess that the gyro might have known that I was turning the
like
point down, and
infrared or something.
the infrared sensor may have known it was now against a surface.
Right, now you're on a surface. Yeah.
And so once I had it there, in theory, I could use that like a mouse to do my aiming. And I know a lot of people are very excited about this idea of mouse control and FPS, and they like motion control. I've never been that partial to it for the Metroid Prime games, because to me, those games have always been more detective and archaeology style games. To me, it's not about, like, Samus is a bounty hunter. Of course she can shoot her targets. Like, she's like great at what she does. Like, to me, like the fiction of that game and kind of the interactivity that makes sense for it is that she can lock onto everything to scan it, understand it, defeat it, whatever the case may be, and then use her wits via me, the player, to switch to the the beam needed or the visor needed or something like that. And so the idea that Samus might even miss her targets is an idea that, yes, maybe that is true to the 2D games. Didn't feel like it was baked into the core of how the games. And again, this may be as weird a theory or as my antipathy for Donkey Kong 64. I have all these strange opinions. But you can apparently turn off the gyro controls, and you can do a more traditional, old school lock onto it as well. But that the challenge with the motion control, the mouse control rather, is all the demos, all of them were standing up. I know a lot of people are into like standing desks and stuff like that, but I don't know if people who use standing desks tend to game mouse and keyboard standing.
Right.
I feel like people are mostly like in their chairs, right, when they're doing mouse and keyboard. And so there's
if you're a PC gamer, I think you're probably sitting down and gaming.
Right.
I am very concerned about this, honestly, because I'm not like a PC gamer really, and I like to sit on my couch when I play games like a normal person.
So to what extent did they let you say, like, well, let me try this on my leg here, or let me try it on my arm? Like, to what extent were they open to you testing the functionality?
Totally fine. They were actually overall very chill about the handling of the hardware. And I'll get to that, but I want to just be very clear about the point I was making about the table for this particular demo, and then I want to elaborate also on Krysta's concern. The problem was I was standing, and so my hand had to kind of be like this with my elbow high because of where the height the table was at. And then trying to move a mouse around that way didn't feel as good as, like, usually your elbow would be lower, I think, or level with your hand if you're using a mouse. So my experience using the mouse controls on Metroid Prime was quite poor, in part, I think, because I had this like carpal tunnel in waiting kind of posture. The other problem with it is that when you hold the Joy-Con on its edge, the face buttons are on the side. Nicely, the shoulder buttons, and people can sort of play around with this with their own Joy-Cons for Switch 1. Put that thing on its side, and your pointer finger and your middle finger will quite naturally land on the bumper and the ZR or ZL, whichever hand you're using. And you can imagine those as a mouse, left mouse, right mouse button, right? Those work nicely. But the Metroid Prime controls still wanted me to hit X for the Samus scan visor. And so now picture, and again, you can do this. Just take out your right Joy-Con Joy-Con controller, and try it, and then try to not just hit the X button, but remember, you have no muscle memory for this. Maybe after you do this a bunch of times, you will attain it, but this is not a posture or a gesture, I guess, that we've done as gamers with our Switch controllers at all. When I played Civ 7, which also uses the mouse controllers, they were more about put your two fingers on the shoulder and ZR buttons, use it as a mouse, but then put your thumb on the analog stick, which is sticking right out. Actually, that was very comfortable. And I think I was using that maybe for zoom in, zoom out on the camera. And they said, oh, don't worry, in the final version, we'll also have things mapped to every button, including Y for skipping turns. And I was thinking to myself,
no, complicated.
But so the left Switch controllers, I want to say sometimes the left one was plugged in at some of the kiosks. I don't even remember if both left and right were always plugged in. They may have been. But I played Drag and Drive, which people may think of as Drag X Drive because of how it's spelled. And this is the wheelchair basketball game.
Yeah.
Is the main kind of showcase of the mouse control. And for that one, before the game even said it, I was like, I don't know about using the table. I'm going to try my legs. And it was much more comfortable just sitting there. And so, Krysta, the good news for you is that it totally works with the legs. And you can just play, on the leg, or my cat wasn't there, so I couldn't try it on my cat's back. That could be mutual, and cat might like that at the same time.
You're like petting your cat while you're
exactly
playing Drag and Drive.
Right.
I can get down with that.
They can make a new Nintendogs where you pet.
Oh, you pet your actual dog.
Pet the actual dog. It comes with an actual dog, and you in the box, and you pet the dog with the controller.
Day one,
I tried briefly. I was like, "Oh, could I do it on my chest?" Like you can, like it's. I think it's just detecting that it's against a surface.
Against any surface, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you look at the packaging peripheral stuff, whatever that comes with the Switch 2, it includes, what's it called, the Joy-Con grip? Is that what it's called on the Switch one?
Yeah, the one that makes it look like a little doggy with a little thing in the back.
I never thought of it that way, but yes, it's like the extra black edge to the thing, right?
Yeah.
Which prevents you from locking the controllers back on the system, but when you turn it sideways, makes it easier to hit ZL, ZR, right?
Those are the rails. Those are called rails.
Yeah.
Yes.
The rails.
That's something different. Yes.
Oh, the Joy-Con. Oh, now I know why you said it looks like a dog. Yeah. Okay, definitely not Joy-Con grip. Okay,
yeah.
Right. I totally got it. Yes, it does look like a dog. Yes. Never saw that. Now I can't unsee that in my mind. I love that. The rails. That's what it's called. Maybe.
Yes.
They want to charge you extra for those too. It's like $14.
Well, so I believe they come packaged with the Switch 2. Again, if I'm misspeaking, I'm sure somebody can figure that out. But I believe they come with it, and they get attached to there. And the function of those for the Switch 1 was that those two shoulder buttons, which I just called ZLZR, but they're not. What were they called?
SL.
SL and SR.
SR, yes. Yeah.
Those were depressed in and very hard to get
hard to push, right.
So you put the rails on them, and then suddenly those buttons were raised because the rails raised them. You wouldn't think you would need that at all with the Joy-Con for Switch 2 because there's just those buttons are not as depressed in SLSR. That said, the new rail, which I don't even know if they would call it a rail, and it's more like an oval that goes around that thin edge of the Joy-Con, of that inside edge, and it has I think are pads at both ends of it. That becomes a smoother surface to rub the mouse control. So I didn't think of this until the end, and I certainly wasn't given the permission to take the thing off or put it on or whatever and compare. But my guess is that on a hard surface table, using mouse control may feel a bit rougher, literally rougher, like you're scuffing either your controller or your table. And then you put this thing on, and then you get more of it's like a portable. Yeah,
it's like an Apple mouse where it has the little rubber bits on the bottom, so that when you're on a surface, it doesn't feel.
There you go.
Like it's scratching your table or whatever.
There you go. So yeah, you can use your leg, which that's itself obviously generally a softer surface than a table,
right?
To do that, and so it works. But it's the most divisive thing that I've seen in terms of reactions. Ash Parrish, my former Kotaku colleague who now writes for The Verge, wrote a piece today critical of the mouse controls, saying she just didn't like the feel of them.
Did it feel like a gimmick to you? Did it feel the Joy-Con ice cubes like that, or was it more functional? would you say?
Oh, you're talking about the HD Rumble stuff?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Does it feel
I'm-
like would you want to play a whole game like that?
Yeah, I'd be
using a
fine with it.
mouse?
I'm skeptical of
Okay.
any haptic stuff because, I mean, Star Fox 64, the Rumble Pack felt good, but generally haptics are, they're like, they're
Yeah.
okay, but I feel like they're often kind of overhyped. Whereas the ability to just have kind of cursor control, I've never
Mhm.
felt good about motion control, gyro controlled pointer cursor stuff, and that's kind of been, a lot of people have kind of been okay with that for a couple of generations, whether it was Wii stuff or beyond. And I'm picking things off a menu. I want, a mouse is always going to feel better. And so if I can just select things by, using that mouse control, and if I can flip to that as quickly, that would feel good. And, hope springs eternal about the creative renaissance that Nintendo had with the DS, and when they started making stylus-driven games, and it opened up new categories of design for them, that the company kind of revisiting the idea of a mouse, which they pointed out, hey, we made one for Mario Paint back on the Super Nintendo. But then revisiting making a mouse could augur in, a wave of new ideas from them that involve, things that we would use pointer controls for, or even, heaven forbid, something, drawing based again, or, but a shorter answer is please, yes, bring on WarioWare mouse.
There we go.
Oh, I would love
yes.
that.
Hopefully that's already being worked on.
That's basically like the DS WarioWare experience, Touch WarioWare Touch. If they had a WarioWare mouse version, that would be amazing.
Right. I mean, WarioWares have been great showcases of touch rotation control on WarioWare Twisted, right? Something that wasn't even native to a specific platform, but to that cartridge, or motion control more recently. I really trust those WarioWare teams to take an interface concept and do some fantastic things with it. So I would love to see them do that.
Yeah.
Well, we have to ask, because it's become one of the overwhelming conversation points about the Switch 2. What discussions were you having with the people at this event about the pricing information as it was rolling out?
Right. So the event ends, and it was weird they didn't announce the price because you thought that was going to possibly be the final thing that they said. Then the press release hit, so I'm still sitting there, and I was trying to file in real time. Okay, this event ends, and my goal with my GameFile newsletter is that if I'm at an event like this, I'm writing while it's happening. Pretty much, I just have to do one more scan of it, and I hit send. And I was like, oh, they didn't say the price. Let me just double check. The press release comes in, and it says right at the top, introducing Switch 2 June 5th for $449.99. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting that they didn't announce it there, but they said it here. That tells you something about what they thought the impact of communicating that would be. I'm curious actually what you all think in terms of that strategy, but that was the first wave of it. And then it was, what do the games cost? But just staying on the hardware, in both of your experiences, what did that tell you that they did not put it in the direct? But
they definitely were concerned about that. They clocked early that this might be a point of, contention for people, and with the direct, they were very focused on, like, in their Nintendo way of, let's make sure that people are staying focused on the experiences, people are staying focused on how amazing these games look. Let's not distract them from that with price. But I think it actually, unfortunately, had a bit of a negative, more of a negative effect than they anticipated. So,
I mean, if you have a piece of information that people are going to want to know, and you don't put it in your video showcase that millions of people are watching, but you immediately have it in your press release that comes right after that, that's going to result in coverage that maybe the same amount of people are going to read. Have you effectively hidden it from anybody, or
you're
not?
Exactly. You're not
vibe?
fooling anybody. It's not an effective communication strategy, and in fact, it caused more confusion. So
the whole communication strategy about the pricing of everything for the Switch 2 is very curious to us, because there were some things that were obfuscated in a press release. There's some details that we still don't know about today, and nobody from Nintendo seems to be getting out there openly talking about anything, which just makes it even more confusing. Like we before we started recording, we were talking about this strange rumor of Mario Kart being $90.
Mario Kart.
And it's like, where did this come from? They've just lost control of this.
They have, and the live chat in the YouTube stream of the Nintendo Direct, as I saw you put on social media,
the Treehouse Live
was all drop the price, drop the price,
Yeah.
drop the price, with the occasional trolling raise the price, thrown in there.
Yeah.
So
So at the event itself, though, when you finally got the press release and realized the price was, in there, not the direct, what was sort of the mood, and was there other discussion around you around?
A lot of people kind of drifted off to other things. Jason Schreier, good friend of mine, former colleague, and now doing a great job covering games at Bloomberg with Cecilia D'Anastasio. Jason was there, and I was saying to him, "Did they say anything about the game price? Because I'm seeing the hardware price. I need to send out my newsletter. I want to have my news out. I want to send it out. It's an email newsletter, and you can read it online, but I can't take it back. I can't easily update it. I want to make sure that I've got it right, and I'm sending something out that's useful to people." And so I had originally written it as they didn't, I had like bullet points for hardware price. They didn't say anything. Software price, they didn't say anything. And then I'm suddenly seeing, again, as the thing ends, they've announced the hardware price. So he's kind of come and gone and everything. I'm like, Jason, did they say anything? Are you seeing anything about game prices? And he's like, oh, and then he's like, I just texted you. I'm like, what? And then I check, and he just found a screenshot of Mario Kart $79.99. And I'm like, where did you see that? Because I'm looking at the press release. It's not in the press release, but it's on Nintendo.com.
The website, yeah.
Go through the Mario Kart World page, and you wait for all of the weird widgets to load, and everything is moving. And like, look at this feature, that like was it like a last minute attempt to distract people? Like, oh, this stuff.
Yeah, I think it was.
and then you see, oh, the price is right there, and so then of course it's like, oh my God, are all the games going to cost $80? Because for better or worse, that game did not appear in the direct to be like obviously more grand than Donkey Kong or Metroid or something. So there was nothing inherently obvious of like, oh, well, they're charging $80 because that's the game that they just said is going to contain, every Mario Kart track of all time or something like that, right? Like there's nothing like that was screaming that this is beyond the standard, impressive new game. And so I then, I think I've sent my newsletter by then without the $80. I think I sent it just without the game prices. So I immediately put an update in there. But then of course, and thankfully I had the discipline to not say, well, this is what every game's going to cost. And I just said, this is what Mario Kart appears to cost. Because then very quickly after that, he and I think figured out that, the Canadian Broadcasting Company was there. They wanted to have me talk about Switch 2 for them. And so I was in the room waiting for my turn to do an interview there with them, and I'm looking it up, and I saw that Donkey Kong Bananza was selling for listed on the Nintendo site as $69.99. So it's this thing. Now this is not an unusual phenomenon. This kind of figuring out the information as the event goes along. I'll take you back about a decade ago to Microsoft's notorious Xbox One TV games event. This is known as sort of the most disastrous rollout of a new console of all time, where they announced a lot of things that now are kind of similar to some of the things Nintendo's doing with the digital game card, but it was a lot about limitations on game sharing. But the real dramatic one was that the physical games needed to be connected to the internet. If you had a disc game, you couldn't easily just hand a game to somebody else, which led to the whole, PlayStation snarking on them at the E3 following with, here's how you share games on PlayStation. You just hand them to each other. And sorry for the digression to a digression to a digression.
I'm sure Nintendo will love that you're comparing that event to theirs.
Well, the thing is, so the thing that happened at that event was, which is vivid in my mind, is that I had an interview with Phil Harrison, who at the time was a Microsoft executive. And this was like hours after Don Matrick had gone and done this whole thing and sort of revealed some aspects of this, trying to put a positive spin on this idea that it's very much a TV watching box and everything, and an entertainment box beyond a games box. And then I'm interviewing Phil Harrison, and while I'm talking to him, I'm like, so you're going to have this discs go in the thing, and then how often do they have to check? And I forget what he told me it was at this point. I forget if he said every 30 days or every day or whatever he said. I really can't remember. I should, because it was my scoop. And so then I'm walking out of the room to be ferried to my next, appointment where I'm going to be put in like the soundproof room to see how Microsoft records audio for games or something. And I'm like texting or emailing Jason or somebody else from Kotaku at the time, being like, I can't believe he just told me this. And so that becomes a new piece of information, and we're updating our articles on Kotaku at the time, and you're finding this stuff out bit by bit. And then I come out of that room for that next appointment, and I've got a Microsoft PR person intercepting me saying, well, we want to tell you a little more and so what's enjoyable about that is that it gets a little bit closer to what real reporting is, which is you're constantly finding things out.
Developing story.
yeah, it's a story. It's things that happen. You're not just rewriting a
Right.
press release. You're trying to dig or whatever. And this is not the the most Pulitzer worthy scooping, but that was a little bit of how yesterday unfolded. And frankly, like discovering that Donkey Kong cost 70 rather than 80 is one way this would diverge from that disastrous Microsoft event, because it was like, oh, okay, they're not going to 80 for everything. They're not, they
Right.
have not lost their minds. 70, I think, is a
Yet.
price people can understand Nintendo would go to for their new games, because that's what so many publishers have gone to now, whether you like it or not, whether you think this is what the industry needs to help subsidize development, whether you think that these companies make so much money you can afford to spend more, like, can debate that. But that was certainly an interesting dynamic all happening while there are all these Nintendo people around, and you go up to them. I said, can you tell me anything about the pricing of the games? And the response is from PR people is, well, you can see on our website. It says this, and I'm
Keep
like,
it locked.
you got anything else?
We are very scared. Please don't talk to us.
Our life is on the line.
And nobody was giving pricing. I did not ask for the pricing on the smaller games, so I don't know what the Nintendo Switch 2 system tour, which I think
I don't think we still know.
I don't know.
As of
one knows
recording this,
that.
I don't think
Yeah.
that information is out.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also I think there was some questions around the varying pricing of the Switch enhanced games. Some of
Yes.
them do look like, okay, this is full on new content, DLC, whatever, paid DLC. Some of them is like a little bit less than that. So what is the pricing there? And then when you finally like do the math and total that up, are you like even past $80?
But also some of them are just included with NSO.
And some
but
of them are
aren't.
included.
So it's
in some,
confusing.
It's very confusing the
Right.
way that they have managed this pricing conversation altogether.
Oh, for sure. So nobody would tell me what any of the add-ons would cost. So I
Mhm.
played the
Okay.
add-ons for Kirby and the Forgotten Land and Mario Party, and the demo was there. Didn't have anything to tell me about that. They have release dates. Like one is July and one is August, if I remember correctly.
Right.
They're pretty
But
soon.
no pricing. Yeah.
Obviously, they have a lot of leeway there if these are digital add-ons in terms of what they price those at. Although it's going to be a physical game as well to some extent. They should have the pricing. They should know the pricing by now. I'd heard that the Switch Edition upgrades are supposed to be in the $10 to $20 range. Nintendo, obviously, part of this is that they don't typically drop the prices significantly, if at all, of their legacy games.
They don't. Yeah.
So if they're any other publisher, their games from 2 or 3 years ago are no longer what they retailed for, and they're if they had been 70 or 60, they're 50, 40, 30, or even 20 by now. Capcom has been making record profits for the last decade with an aggressive strategy of constantly dropping price on their games, not necessarily like super quickly so you feel burnt by it, but recognizing that there's another customer tier to reach when your game is $30, when your game is $20, when your game's, I think they've said they want to make every game eventually $10 at some point, so they can also sell in more markets around the world and places where people don't have as much income. Nintendo is like, well, we're charging you $60 all for all time, and so a $20 add-on to a Kirby game from 3 years ago makes it look like it's going to cost $80, and that's what Walmart's listing the expanded version of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And my takeaway on the Kirby game is I love that game. My kids and I played that game. We had the greatest time with it. I began playing the expansion Star-Crossed World, and it did not immediately feel to me like anything more than another cool level of the game I played. It did not feel like it needed the Switch 2, is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, you might be like, hey, if it's an expansion and maybe it's a big expansion, we might think of that as it deserves a $20 price, but you have to buy a $450 system to access it if you like the old game.
Yeah.
And my question is, are we sure that are people going to feel with some of these Switch 2 edition, upgrades that, hey, a lot of this should just be added to Switch 1 and I'm being pushed into upgrading? Certainly the better frame rates on Zelda, the higher resolution graphics, that kind of thing makes sense that the newer hardware would take. And we've seen Sony charge $10 for a lot of these upgrades into the new gen systems. But I look at something like that and I'm like, it's $80 for what's essentially a 3-year-old game, or plus an expansion that feels like it's not really tapping the hardware. And maybe Star-Crossed World will eventually have aspects of it where I'm like, oh, clearly they couldn't technologically have done this on the old device, but it didn't feel that way. So I feel like I'm actually more like okay and understanding of even charging $80 for a Mario Kart World if that's going to be a game that has like, a decade of longevity to it or whatever, the way Mario Kart 8 did, for players, then I am okay wrapping my head around this idea of what some of these upgrades are going to cost. Because $20 on top of a $60 game you never drop price in just seems, it's like asking a lot.
Yeah. Just as people who, worked on the communication side, we've been so interested in that side of the story, and we're just going to keep an eye on it. But we know you have limited time. It's almost time for you to go. Before we wrap up, the one thing that surprised you the most that you saw at the event, of like, oh, I didn't expect to be so intrigued by this.
Well, Donkey Kong, I already said I was into, but what I was most pleasantly surprised by was the return of Weird Nintendo. So I think we've discussed this before, but I like when Nintendo gets extra quirky in terms of making things like Nintendo Labo, or they did some of the more experimental download-only games. And in recent years, particularly on the Switch, yes, Labo was on Switch, but I feel like we've seen less of this sort of small-scale experimentation within their games. We've seen grand experimentation with the sort of revitalization of the Zelda franchise, and they've done some amazing things on a large scale. But I haven't gotten that feeling of, I'm playing something made by like the Skunkworks team in Nintendo, tinkering around doing something unusual. And I felt that way. Again, I have no idea who's making Dragon Drive. I'm saying this, and it may not even be made by Nintendo for all I know. But I felt that way in seeing something like Dragon Drive, which took a setting and a milieu in terms of people in wheelchairs playing basketball, and saying that fits well with this idea of dual mouse control. Who's ever played a game with two mice before? Like, I don't know. Maybe if I'd played Donkey Kong 64 with two mice, I would have liked it a lot better.
You would have a better experience.
But I don't know. I don't know exactly how good that game will be overall. But that Nintendo Switch Tour game really intrigued me, because it's full of these mini games that have unlockable variations. And I didn't unlock the variations. And at the very most basic, it's like, hey, answer a quiz of what frame rate you think this ball is bouncing in front of you in. And it's like, do you think this is 20 frames a second or 40? And I'm like, this is like Digital Foundry, the game. And weird, but
you cannot charge money for that. That's just unacceptable to me.
But what if they have some great idea about a frame rate related game?
What if?
Okay, you buy it and you tell me about it, because I won't buy it unless.
What if?
So I mentioned WarioWare Twisted before, and one of my favorite things about WarioWare Twisted, which is one of my favorite games of all time, is that since the whole game is used with the rotation sensor on the Game Boy Advance, they have you may recall Super Mario Brothers World 1-1, and you play it by kind of rotating, where it rotates around as you go through it. Pardon me, I hit the cough button effectively on all my previous coughs.
It's okay.
I missed. In this one, they want to show off the value of having 4K graphics. Again, very un-Nintendo to be like bragging about the specs of things. And they start you off, it's very small, on the side of the screen. You see just what would be the opening screen of Super Mario Brothers 1-1. And then as you run, the screen gets wider and wider. And eventually, the entire length of Super Mario Brothers 1-1 is unfurled across as you move through it across the screen. Now, obviously, it's pretty short, right? Because to be able to fit that all even across a pretty big size TV, you have to make it pretty compressed. But you get to play across the whole level. And I really like that idea of kind of single screen Mario's side scroller. And I'd not ever seen Nintendo dabble with that. I don't know if that game would contain all of Super Mario Brothers being able to be played that way. But could you imagine, like, let's just say, and I'm not saying they're doing this, what if you played at the top of the screen 1-1, and then below it you played 1-2?
Yeah, like a ribbon. Yeah, the levels just keep going.
And that would be cool. They had all of Mario, but I don't know that they're doing that. But like, there was a Castlevania game made like over a decade ago for Xbox Live Arcade, and it was like, what if Castlevania took place on one screen? It was like a fun experiment. So I don't know like how deep or quirky the experiments get in that tour game. But I found that interesting and surprising. So I would say that.
Awesome.
Well, yes, thank you for checking in and reporting for us, since we are here on the West Coast and very much not invited to these events.
You think you can't get an interview? We can't even get invited. Come on now.
Can I throw in I want to throw in a thought for you all and for
please.
Okay, I want people to think about the 3DS a lot. Okay, the 3DS. Because there's been a lot of discourse about the Switch 2 rather, and Wii to Wii U, or I don't know, even N64 or SNES to N64 to GameCube, and sort of Nintendo going from like a peak to something lower. And I think the analogy that I was thinking about a lot when I was at the event yesterday was the phenomenon of the DS and then the 3DS as it followed. And I think it's very apt to be mindful of this when thinking about kind of where things are going with Nintendo and where things might go. The DS was one of Nintendo's most popular systems ever. It had like 3 lightning in a bottle games. It had Nintendogs, the virtual pet that people loved. It had Mario Kart 7, a staple, traditional video game that was a hot seller. And it had brain training, turn it book style, use a stylus, make yourself and keep your mental health good. And it had tons of people buying it that normally would not have bought Nintendo hardware, right? Switch is very analogous to that. Breath of the Wild, Mario Kart
Animal
Deluxe,
Crossing.
huge selling games. Animal Crossing is the crossover game to people who didn't think they were ever going to buy a Nintendo system. How do you follow that up? Well, what happened with the DS? They had released iterative versions of the DS, DSi, DS XL, similar to the iterative versions of the Switch, right? Finally did a step up on the 3DS. That's what I think that we should think of the Switch 2 as. And what did they learn with the 3DS? They learned initially that they made it too expensive. They released it thinking people were ready for a step up to this phenomenally popular system. They struggled to bring people over. In that case, maybe they didn't have the killer game they needed to have at launch to help sort of sell people on that idea. And what did they have to do? Y'all know, several months later, the company apologized. Mr. Iwata, rest in peace, took a pay cut in the process. They created the ambassador program to reward people who had bought the system at a high price early on. And they were able to kind of right the ship so that it was a stable and strong business for them. And, it wasn't as big as DS, unless you're a Nintendo shareholder. Who cares? It wasn't quite as big as DS, but it became like a healthy system full of great creativity, probably my favorite Nintendo system ever. And so I'm curious if the Switch 2 is about to follow that same trajectory, coming in at a price that's a bit daunting. I think its lineup feels better early on than the 3DS's lineup felt at this time. But maybe they find themselves in a spot where they have to say, to me, this is like the worst case scenario. It's like, oh, well, we priced it too high. Sorry, we'll make it lower, and they'll come up with some freebie for their early adopters. But I think that's the historical model to look at. Am I onto something, or should I be thinking, I don't know, Virtual Boy or...
No, let's hope not. No, I think you're definitely onto something. Anything to follow, it's just tough. It's challenges. Your bar is so high when you follow something extraordinarily successful for a number of reasons, some of which were outside of your control, like a pandemic. And you have to follow it up with something else. And, the world's a different place now. It's just going to be tough. So they're going to have to figure out how to do that. And, step one might be them just communicating to us what the heck is going on. So people won't be, locked in confusion and misinformation. But I do think that you're onto something in terms of that comparison. It does feel like that.
And to that, I'll add on, Nintendo, bring on Rusty's Real Deal Baseball 2.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that's a great game.
Do you remember what you could do with the first game? You could haggle with Rusty the dog about the price of the mini games in the game.
Yes.
People are ready to haggle.
Negotiate with a cartoon dog about the price of Mario Kart. It's the game we need.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for being here with us. You're always a welcome guest anytime here. And we love reading GameFile every single day.
Yes, please take a moment to plug GameFile, because we are very happy subscribers, very happy paid subscribers, and we love reading that.
Okay.
And you have some great footage of you playing these games on GameFile. So I want people to go there to see actually videos of you playing the games.
That's right. GameFile is the newsletter I write at gamefile.news. You can read a free version of one of the newsletters a week. You can read the early, the preview versions of others, but there's 3 to 4 newsletters a week. As much original news as I can pack in there. And in cases like my Switch 2 preview or hands-on, you can see footage of all that we talked about and extra stuff as well, including me playing Wind Waker through the GameCube backwards compatibility and experiencing the snappy save states of loading right back into the action based on wherever you decide to create a save state. So there's a lot of stuff in there. I'll actually have more Switch 2 coverage to come, so look forward to that. But certainly I'm happy for people to check it out and tell me what they think.
Awesome. We're going to leave all that in the description as well for people, so you can easily click through. But yes, we are avid followers of GameFile and everything that you do. And it's been awesome to see you find so much success with.
Thanks so much.
Going
I'm the
independent.
mutual
It's amazing.
appreciation. Love what you guys do.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we'll let you go.
Until we speak
Thank
again.
you so much. It was great having you.
Thanks.
Hi, Stephen.
Bye.
Bye.